are involved in. And why don't we start with Careen Yapp from Konami. Careen's actual title is Vice President, Acquisition and Franchise Development with Konami Digital Entertainment. And Careen, maybe you can just start us off real quickly with an introduction of your role at Konami and what what makes Konami so great.
There's too many things to say. So are you guys familiar with Konami?
Can everyone hear her, or does she need to use the microphone?
Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah. So Frogger, Dance Dance Revolution, Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania, Silent Hill, all those cool titles. How many people like Contra? Good to see. So Konami has been around for 40 years. We are a video game publisher. We're, I think, top 3 in Japan, but we're a top video game publisher worldwide. I work in acquisitions and franchise development, so we actually, my group handles all of the content coming in and then building the licensing and merchandising programs for all the Konami brands. So we meet with developers and licensors and have conversations about opportunities that are available to create video games based upon original IP or licensed IP. Is that enough?
Good enough for that?
All right, cool.
Yep. On the end, we have Denis Dyak from Silicon Knights, founder and president of what is it, 23 years now that you're in business?
Yeah. We incorporated in 1992, but our first game was published in 91. So I'll transition from there. So we've been making video games for a long time. I guess I can use this. We're an independent developer, means we work with different publishers. We've worked on all platforms. So from our first game that was published worldwide on the Atari, the Amiga, and the PC back in 1991. We then moved. We did a bunch of PC games. We then moved on to consoles with Legacy of Kain, Blood of the Legacy of Kain, created the original. For the PlayStation 1's our first console title, did Eternal Darkness, Metal Gear Solid, Twin Snakes for Konami, and we also did Human, which was our most recent one with Microsoft. Our game coming out soon is X-Men Destiny with Activision, and we've got other unannounced titles that we have yet to disclose and are excited about. I hope everyone else is.
Excellent, thanks. Next beside him, Scott Simpson, CEO of now Ascenscion CrossMedia.
Correct. We're going to bring the room down a little bit. Give him some easy rock as you drive home. Ascenscion is, we merged companies. There's 2 companies, one in Toronto, one in Ottawa, Bedlam Studios and Playbrains, and we also moved in a technology company called Bitheads, put them all together in this stupidly named Ascenscion CrossMedia, which nobody's really happy with, but yet here we are. So what we do is we concentrate on downloadable and mobile and work on downloadable console stuff a lot. So we have 4 titles coming out for console this year, which is actually wonderful. But we're really concentrated on building technologies to connect PCs with Facebook stuff, with mobile stuff, with XBLA and PSN, etc. So it's really a technology piece in the middle that we are really pushing to do, but we also do content stuff that you'll find out about as you buy all of our stuff this year, but nobody really cares.
Next, and a late addition, I'm not sure it's actually in your program, but certainly a great addition to our panel is Dave Elton, Director of Design from Silicon Knights. And one of the reasons that we added Dave to the panel is, A, he begged us, and also is because of his background. And Dave has experience both as a publisher and developer, so I thought it was a great addition. So Dave, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm currently Director of Design at Silicon Knights, but I'm actually a fairly recent addition there. Previously I worked at Electronic Arts, Microsoft Game Studios, Claim Entertainment, a couple of others. And as part of that, I've been working as doing business development for Microsoft. I worked with EA Partners for a while before they got consolidated down into San Francisco. And I'm part of the pitch process team at Silicon Knights now. So I've got a fairly varied background in making pitches. And any time to be on a panel with Scott.
I'll note for the record, I also have a little Silicon Knights, so I am also the Silicon Knights. Tonight, 45 minutes, Careen. 3 against 1. All part of the successful pitch is physical intimidation. That's rule number 1.
Yes.
Before we get started, we should actually nominate someone in the room to count the number of people actually in the room.
We already got.
Did we actually get someone?
I have a wager for the number of people.
I believe Scott has lost already, just looking at the
No,
numbers. But we will reveal the numbers anyhow at the end. Where I thought we'd start, and certainly what has been made very clear by my colleagues here on the on the panel is, and I just noticed, did we they misspelled your name? No. Okay. I was just going to say, is, from an original content perspective, and what I understand, you don't necessarily go out and pitch work for hire services. It's really all about going in there with a publisher and talking about your original content and maybe getting an offer for doing work for hire on other stuff. So that's really where it all starts. So that's where I thought we would start with this panel, is just talk about a little bit about your past experience in pitching content. And Scott, knowing a little bit about your business, and why don't you talk to us about maybe Sideways and the game that you've been able to pitch on, various iterations.
The game I unsuccessfully pitched to Konami? The one that Konami turned down?
I thought I would
highlight that. Down, the worst game I've ever seen. There's no way we're actually going to publish that game. Is that the one you mean?
That's exactly it.
As long as you want to open up fresh wounds, Rob, that's good. So, generally speaking, again, I'm sure most of the room is full of developer people who get turned down by publishers a lot. But that's fine. It's their job to weed out people like me and let in real games. That's fine. But generally speaking, the pitch process is generally pretty good. If you actually have your own IP and you're actually pitching it around, and Dennis knows this better than anybody, it's very difficult to pitch a new IP. It's a lot easier to actually work with a publisher's IP, come up with the concept of IP they already own, because they have an idea of how to sell it and how to put that out. So if you're actually bringing new IP to the table, it's kind of a tough sell already. But if you're new enough to the business, you don't know this, and this is actually good. Ignorance is good in some cases because you actually are dumb enough to actually go through the pitch process. So what you do is you go and you pitch a bunch of publishers, and you try to find the ones who are applicable to the IP that you're actually pitching. If I'm actually pitching like a horror genre game, it's unlikely that I'm going to go to Disney itself. I'm going to go to Dimension, or I'm going to do something that's actually different and try to find the right publisher for what I'm doing. So the IP in question that Rob's talking about is this game called Sideways, which will be coming out in July, late July. Downloadable thing that we basically pitched around, and yes, Konami did actually say no, but that's fine. I still love Careen. You're all right. The reasons by which she turned down the game, she will surely tell you soon. But the idea was it's this action platformer with 2D and a 3D world. It's all very cool. It's a neat game. And we actually did end up getting 3 offers to actually put the thing out. We chose to go with Sony Online because PSN was a growing. It's going to be the future of downloadable content, we thought. That's really prescient on our side. And so yeah, the game can come out any time now, except oddly enough, there is no PSN. So the legitimacy for the reason for me being on the panel is probably threefold, which is don't do anything that I'm about to tell you. So Dennis is an example of success, and this is how to pitch a game. I am here to tell you how to not pitch a game. So we eventually did go with Sony Online. And to do a PSN exclusive, that's even the more funny part. Is we could only put it out on PSN. Again, really good move on my part. But anyway, so we go through it, and we were just talking actually before over lunch how our pitch process generally works. We go out at DICE or some conference like early in the year and do the intros with the publishers, because everybody knows, all the people in the industry. When you get pitching enough, you go and say, I got this property. Oh, I have some interest. I don't have some interest, and then you sort of narrow that down. And then at GDC, you're doing full pitch stuff. And then by E3, you actually have you sign papers and you can go ahead and do your thing. So it generally, for our sake, that's how it's worked, but that's also why we have four games coming out within like 2 months or so. But Sideways itself was a tough thing to pitch because it was a new IP. So there had to be buy-in from the publisher to be looking for something new, whereas Konami is more comfortable with existing IP, or if you're dealing with IP that they actually already own and know how to monetize. So I'm really talking way too long.
But Scott, you pitched that several times, didn't you?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I had to pitch it several times. Nobody wanted it. Okay.
Is there a reason why you had to pitch it a few times?
Well, no, you got to find the right fit, right? You have to find a publisher. Because publishers have their slate, right? I need this kind of a game at this point, or this kind of a game at this point. and you really need to actually fit into where it is. It could be that, I'm sure Careen will tell you, actually she probably won't, but if she wanted to make me feel better, she would tell me they would have taken the game, except they already had an action platformer coming out at this proposed time this year, right? Just say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. No, we all know that's not really true, but the point is you have to actually pitch it around, because it really can be a great game, but it's got to fit the right publisher for the right time and fit a need in their catalog. And if you don't have those three things all together, you can't actually, they will say no, right?
Yes. And another thing with publishers, strategies change all the time. So even though I would like to say them as organized, where I have just these little, I know exactly what I need and I know how.
Well, I know you do. Other publishers.
Oh, other publishers are organized? Okay, well, I'm apparently the unorganized publisher. But from my perspective, at the time that Scott had pitched that product, we were in the middle of a transition, and there was a new head of product development in our US team that had some very strong ideas of how he wanted to move forward. And so at that time, we weren't able to move forward with original IP. That's changed, of course. So it really does have to do with, yes, it has to do with where we have slots and what we're looking for and the types of genres we're looking for. But it also has to do with internal strategy, corporate strategy, and where the company wants to go. But again, it changes all of the time. So if you pitch me before and still call me and pitch me again on the same project, you never know. It's all about timing sometimes.
And we will get into it. Dennis, you've been pimped now as the guru in pitching. And obviously looking at Silicon Knights library of games that you've come out with, you've obviously had a lot of success. Why don't you talk to us about some of the successes that you've had and what made you successful? And maybe you can pick one project.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say a couple things.
What he wants to say is Dave is fired.
That was awesome. That was awesome. For those who didn't see, he spilled ice and water all over the table.
Just ice.
Okay, just ice. So to agree, I want to agree with a couple things, and I want to make this been said previously. First of all, with Careen saying things are always in flux, everything changes all the time. And the way we used to pitch back in 1991, where I didn't even know if there was a video game industry back then, versus how we pitch now are totally different. And the market changes, timing is really important. And Scott's right to some degree, pitching original IP can be difficult, but in my opinion, much more worthwhile. We've created almost all exclusively original IP, with the exception of Metal Gear Solid, which we partnered with Konami, Kojima-san on that. And with one of our latest products, X-Men Destiny, it is a Marvel title that we're working with Activision, but it's generally fairly original within that realm. But when it comes to doing pitches, I think it's really important that if you want to sell a product, that there's two really driving factors that I would always recommend. And this is kind of like one of our golden rules. There's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to say, well, how are we going to monetize this? How is it going to be successful? You're going to hear all kinds of things about marketing and how they're going to look at past product, how they can predict future products. It's kind of like predicting the weather. And so our one global axiom that we like to keep internally is when someone says this will be successful because of X, and you're not sure of it, I'd strongly recommend you not follow that advice. The one piece of advice I can give you when pitching a product is be passionate about it and follow the one rule of you can guarantee if you make something that you want to play yourself, you'll please one person. Okay? That's your best guarantee. So always do something you want to make. Doesn't matter what the product, whether it's Eternal Darkness. When we were creating Eternal Darkness as an example, and we were working with Nintendo on it, we wanted to do something that was very different. We wanted to create a game that you played 12 characters over 2,000 years of history, something that was really never seen before. And we did insanity effects where we had to get special permission to get through lock check of when you're saying you're deleting someone's memory card, takes special approval. And to believe in these kind of things, the only reason that, it took a lot of effort and perseverance, but it happened because we believed in it. And then the other thing that you want to think about when you're doing a pitch, and this is one of the things with Eternal Darkness, which was the sanity system that was fairly unique, is you want to have a hook. You want to get above the noise. So you want to be passionate, and you want a hook. And the hook is, what is that one thing that's going to make your game different from everyone else's? So every time we're thinking about creating something, you want the passion and you want the hook. And if you can remember those two things, whether it's original or whether it's someone else's IP, those are usually some of the key factors of moving forward. There's others, and sometimes they're random and sometimes it depends on the publisher, but that sort of on a 10,000 foot level, that's what I would strongly recommend.
Thanks, Dennis. Careen, why don't you talk about what, some of the things that, some of the pitches that have really worked well in the past for you and that you guys have signed up?
I think it depends on the publisher. For Konami specifically, the more information and video and gameplay that I can show to my sales marketing team, the easier the decision that they will have. When it's just a concept, I think it still has the possibility of getting through the company, but the further along the development of their project is, the easier it is for people to see, touch, to play, to understand, to understand the hook, and get past any reservations they may have. There was a title that I'm negotiating right now, so I'm not going to go into what it is. It's a digital title, but the developer pulled together a video of gameplay, and just the way that it was presented was very unique, and you got it right off the bat of what type of game it was, how much fun it was to play, or how much fun it looked like it was to play. And everyone from marketing, PD, PR, and sales took a look at the video and said, that makes perfect sense. That's the best thing I've seen so far. This is going to stop. So it has to do with taking the materials that you have and organizing them in such a way that you're able to get your message across through a video or through something visual is always better. Our salespeople tend to be very conservative. So anything that you can show them that looks pretty helps.
Thank you. And Dave, I'm going to pick on you a little, and maybe you can talk about what, maybe something that either you guys have pitched or in your previous life where people have pitched to you and what really didn't work and what stood out as being just a terrible pitch that, what you wanted to get out of there as quick as possible.
Please leave my games out of it. Now.
All right, well, that cuts out about half an hour of yeah, no, there definitely have been some great examples. Working at Microsoft, I remember someone coming in and pitching to me saying, I've got the game that's going to destroy Halo. It's like, well, wait, why do I want to destroy Halo? No, thank you. I think some of the things that have been brought up about researching the publisher is a huge thing. Definitely things do change. Scott and Dennis have all brought up. But definitely research the publisher. Finding out what it is that the publisher has currently in their portfolio, and take some guesses also about where they could be going, because things do change. So on the Microsoft side, if you look at where we were trying to put our portfolio for launch of the Xbox 360 versus where we projected what kind of portfolio we wanted to have a number of years down the road, those are two different portfolios as the audiences change. And that goes for the same as for the third-party publishers as well. Understanding what it is that people are wanting to play at a particular time. It's definitely a crapshoot, but it's something that folks can start thinking about what it is that publishers might be looking for. I'm definitely also a big fan of show, don't tell. Anything that you can put in the hands of the business development person to be able to show the rest of their team is a huge benefit. When it comes to reading a paper documentation, there's a lot of imagination that's required, and don't guarantee that the rest of the business development person's team has got a lot of it. Or their imagination might take them in places you don't want them to go. So by having something that is, it can be as simple as a arithmetic, it can be as simple as any sort of visualization of what it is that you're trying to do. Those things go so far beyond what just pure paper can do. That doesn't mean that you have to have a fully playable demo in hand, but anything to help define, to crystallize what your vision is and how the game's going to play, it makes it so much easier for people to make decisions, as Careen was saying. Yeah, again, people's requirements can change. So just because you know, a publisher may be first-person heavy, for example, Microsoft had a lot of first-person shooters or third-person shooters. That doesn't mean that they always wanted to just have that. You can see Microsoft right now, the titles that they're publishing right now, there's now all the Kinect titles. A lot different audience than what they started with.
Thanks, Dave. Why don't we get into a little more discussion now? You know, I've heard from most of you that things have changed over the past years. You know, where the way you pitch something in the early 2000s, late 90s is very different than where we are now. How so? How are things different? And where maybe, you know, the next step is, where are they going to change in the next 5 years?
Okay, since Scott gave me the mic, I guess it's my turn. When we first started doing pitches, we generally had documents with some artwork. Dave mentioned it really briefly. I think he called it, what do you call it? Rip-o-matic. Yeah, there's different terms for it, and I didn't know I couldn't remember the term to use, but you generally now, you have different documents that are a must. But then you have presentations where you take, as an example, if you don't have time to visualize a demo, we almost always have some type of demo now for when we pitch products. But you can have different visualizations of where you want to take it. So you might say, you might take something from, I don't know, what's a movie I like? The Fountain. Big fan of that movie. You take a shot from that and saying, you know, this kind of area is maybe going to look something like this, and you take different parts of different movies and you say, visually, this is kind of the direction that we want to go, and you'd be amazed on how helpful that is. And then at the same time, so you go from I guess just basic small documents to when you have someone walk into a room when you want to do a pitch, and I know when we do, we want to fill the room with pictures and concepts. It's almost like a museum, and you're going to have what I call them Leica reels, or sort of pitch materials, and then demos, and you have multiple people speaking. So it's not just the same person. So we'll generally have a team of 4 or 5 people that will do the pitch now, where before it was just all me. And we found that that's very helpful. And believe it or not, just not like even here having all of us talk, it's, you have different voices, you have different perspectives, you know, different jokes. And from that perspective, it actually creates a lot of good engagement, which is what you want for your pitch. Because you're going to be pitching against thousands of people, and don't be upset when it gets turned down. But you know, just learn and iterate. But that's how it's changed for us.
Who are those people that you bring in now?
So we're structured. So we have we're structured very much like I guess like a movie production studio. So we have very different than most studios. But so we'll have like a director of content maybe speak, or Dave, who's the director of game design, and we'll have a general director of the whole project. So we generally have some of the directors come in, maybe a producer, and myself as well, who's the CCO right now as my current position. And that's how we do it. And they're all specializations in each area that cover something. If someone has a technical question, you know, we've got our director of technology. And if someone's got a game design question, boom, you know, that's how we do it.
And Careen, for you, do you want to see certain people there?
Like me.
Always Scott. Whatever pitch it is, just please have Scott there.
Easy to say no.
I could never say no to Careen.
From my perspective, what has changed so greatly is it's gone from being the traditional platforms to being absolutely everything. So I have a conversation with people about mobile content. I have a conversation with people about digital content on console. I have a conversation with the traditional retail platforms. And so there's just so much to talk about, and there's so much, there's different structures. It's no longer the traditional, publisher is writing a check to developer, publisher is paying a royalty to the developer, and keeping all of the revenue and basically acquiring the IP. Now more and more developers are retaining their IP based upon all of these new digital platforms that are available. Some developers are able to partially fund products or fully fund products. So you have distribution deals and co-publishing deals entering into the picture. So when I have a conversation, it's not necessarily that I need to have everybody in the room. When I'm talking to Dennis is pitching full retail product, and that's what I do need. I need to have his entire team in the room because I have my team in the room, and we need to have we need to see absolutely everything because the level of investment for a project of that size is completely different than talking about an iPhone game. So I think that the pitch materials and the people in the room and the way that it's approached, it really varies, and it has to do with what the individual project is.
And it also matters know where you're pitching or at what level you're pitching. So early pitches aren't going to have as many people as later pitches, depending on where you're doing it in the location. But you're setting up a meeting for GDC where you have 15 or 20 minutes of someone's time. You're not going to get a full pitch out. It's really just, look, we're going to introduce you to the concept of what it is, give you some wing bang visuals that you're going to try to remember on, like how many meetings do you have a week in GDC? Like 50 or 100 meetings or something. Like it's literally that many. Like it's very tough to stand at. So you, again, getting to the point of prepping material so you know that something is remembered. You're never going to sell a deal on your first pitch at GDC in 20 minutes, but you can actually plant the seed that it actually can get done, a couple of months later as you do follow-ups and then more detailed pitches where you get into production schedule and stuff like that. So it's really know when you're pitching as well, or what, how far into it you are at the same time.
And as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please keep flaggers down.
Oh, that's fair.
We're going to keep on moving into different topics, and because I want to cover as much as possible today. And why don't we get into, we were mentioning that you're going to pitch a game depending on. You're going to target certain publishers for certain games. What is the difference in pitching, and maybe Dave, you can talk about the difference in pitching to a Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo versus a third-party publisher?
Sure. So obviously with the platform companies, they still want to make sure that they've got a title that is successful, so looking for a return on investment. But one of the things they are also looking for is making sure that they have product that helps that platform stand out. One of the things that they're looking for is to help sell more platforms as well as sell more titles. So things that they may be looking for are things to either help that platform stand out from the competition or help balance out against other titles. So for example, Sony was very successful with the Gran Turismo franchise. And Microsoft looking at making sure that they've got a portfolio that matches up against Sony. They're able to say, okay, yes, Sony's got this, well, we have this too, and we have all these other things, so you should buy us instead of the Sony platform. They realized that they needed Forza to help balance that out. So when it comes to pitching first party, you are going to be looking at slightly different criteria than for strictly for the third party publishers.
And Careen, what is the advantage of pitching to you over a Microsoft or Sony?
Because your game can be on more than one platform.
And
no, I think there's a lot to be said with working directly with first parties in terms of marketing support. In terms of they do want to sell more hardware units, and they do the more hardware units they sell, the more software that will be built for their platform, and the more royalties they'll earn from their partners. So there is something to be said for pitching to first party. Third party, again, you have the freedom to be cross-platform. You do have, in some cases, have the same level of support. And, it depends on the product, and it depends on what the publisher is looking for. So, there may be a title that fits perfectly within the Microsoft portfolio, I would assume that third-party publishers actually are looking for more content than first-party publishers are, because they are very targeted and focused in what they're doing. And I think from a third-party perspective, we tend to look at a larger range of products that we may add to our portfolio. So, yes.
So again, it gets to know who your publisher is and what you're pitching. So when you're going to Microsoft, it does not behoove you to pitch on a mobile component to say, I want to put this on iOS, because they really have no interest in it. But if you're saying, look, I want to actually make something compelling for XBLA and PC and Windows Phone 7, and I'm going to connect them all together, something that's very interesting for them, because it then actually extends the user, the client. Then you can now, Microsoft can get in their eyes, hey, it's 3 screens in a cloud. I can now own this person 24 hours a day on the bus while they're at work, when they're at home, et cetera. That's very compelling. It's the days of the single SKU future are rapidly diminishing, or like publishers, third party or first party, anybody, need to actually extract and bring their IP to different platforms. It's very, very uncommon now that you're even going to find one kind of platform where you're actually trying to launch a new IP, specifically for just one place. So my question is, because people are falling asleep, so now you do the forced interactive component. How many people in the room actually are here because they actually pitch games to publishers? Like, how many developers here actually pitch stuff out? I am shocked and saddened that there are only 6 people here. So this entire presentation is useless to the rest of you. What else are you doing? This side of the room.
Well, I want to pitch. So
Okay, let me rephrase. How many people are here because they envision pitching to publishers at some point in the future, but maybe not so much now? Okay, see, it's not you, it's me. And of those, how many of you are focusing, say, on mobile, like your iPhone developers or mobile stuff? And how many are like Facebook-y PC guys? And how many are like console-y guys? So it's actually a nice mix of everybody else. See how I did that? I just interacted with the room.
Would you like to do the rest of my job? Did you want the,
Oh dear God, I'd love to do your job. Because then I would actually give myself money from you.
You would have the money, that's right.
And I'll give some money to Cream on. So sorry, I just did a big car wreck in the middle and I don't know what we were talking about.
I'm curious, does anybody have any questions?
Oh,
See? Okay.
we're taking this over,
Here.
Thank you. Thank you. I will, the closest.
Hi, Rick Davidson, Inspirator Games. So given that most people put their hands up, and there was 6 and there was a lot, I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking, how should we approach you guys? You're important people, you get 50 or 100 pitches at a GD. Well, there's a couple of important people.
Dave and I are just filling it.
And a couple of hanger-oners. But how do you like to be approached? How's a mature way for someone who's a developer to approach you without being too in your face and too obnoxious? And how buttoned up and polished do we need to be? So here's my complete blah, 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 hand it in your lap, see you later, give me a call if you like me, or calling your secretary 7 times a day, or meeting you at conferences, or is it just, you know, the good old fashioned, just be eager and everything will work out? How do you like to be approached?
And by the way, I had that question in my,
The way that I specifically like to be approached, you can contact me via phone or via email. The more information you give me will be helpful. So if you say just a brief description of who you are and your team, you can give me a company overview with team bios. That's great, so I can get a good understanding of what you do. And recent games that you've launched and any information about the games. You can always attach things. But from my perspective, I try to talk to everybody that contacts me. And I try to communicate, set up an introductory call, and try to communicate what my goals are at that particular point in time to see if they align with what you're doing, and see if there's something that we can, a project that we can work together on. And if there isn't, then it's just, you know, again, then it's just at GDC, send me an email if you're going to be there. We can, you know, set up a call, or not a call, set up a meeting, we can set up coffee, and we can have that update conversation. From my perspective, it's that continual conversation that's going to get you eventually. It's all about timing. So having that continual conversation, not every 7 times a day, although sometimes I do owe people responses so they can start harassing me. That's okay. I understand that. But it's about having that continual conversation and learning how the publisher strategy is changing, whether drastically or slightly over time, and how your strategy is changing over time. Because eventually it will get to the point where you're both on the same page at the same time, and you've talked to each other for years, and you're ready to go, and you get it done.
And I should point out that it's a perfect segue into what we're doing with Konami tomorrow, and stuff that EDC does is really, tomorrow we've set up, I think it's 17 or 18 one-on-one meetings with Careen, with local publisher developers, and people attending the event, and really that's what we try and add that value and make it easier for you to connect with publishers, so that it sort of opens those doors for at least that conversation. So.
Certainly I'm not a publisher, you won't be pitching me, but the one set of advice that I could give on that, well, two actually. One is perseverance. Perseverance. That is more important than anything else in this industry. Okay? We've been doing it a long time. You're going to get told all kinds of things that you can't, you shouldn't, blah, blah, blah. Perseverance, perseverance, perseverance. The other thing I would strongly recommend, and this takes time, you have to know the publishers, avoid doing your pitches at GDC and E3. Make those meet and greets. Do them before or after. Because your chance of making an impression one-on-one in a meeting, if you have to fly down to Konami and sit down with Careen and just before lunch or something, and it's not Careen's fault, it's just the humans are all the same. You can only digest so much information. Do what you can to position yourself separately. Separate yourself. And by doing that, your chances of success will greatly increase. There's no guarantee for anything, but those are the two things I would say.
And just to back that up, we actually had some Konami meetings at GDC, but instead we flew out the week before and gave you your pitch the week before to do, because then we knew we would actually have real attention for whatever it was, an hour and a half or 2 hours.
And sales and marketing.
And sales and marketing and PR, whatever, are all going to be there because you go to the mountain. And it very much is appreciated by the publisher, I am assuming, that we would actually make the effort to come out, because it really is, there's no way you're going to get that much attention. You can't even have a meeting with Careen for 2 hours, unless drinks are involved and it's late. But not actually during the show. Which is actually the other important part. When you're asking about when and where, the bar is always a good idea to meet people. That is very legitimate.
I don't agree.
For some of us, that's a good place to. You don't pitch at the bar.
Oh, okay.
You're meeting and greeting them. You meet people at the bar.
Meeting and greets are fine. I agree with that.
Never pitch at the bar. Actually, that is the point. Never pitch at the bar. Never really pitch at GDC. Give the idea of what you want to talk about, but then follow it up with a real meeting at the publisher location. And they're all located relatively, in pockets, so you can actually visit multiple publishers at once. Even though we only saw Konami when we went to LA at that time.
Doesn't GDC happen at the bar anyhow?
The meet and greet stuff. Yeah.
Just one more thing.
Yep.
And realize that most publishers are at most developer shows. So we're here, we're at GDC, we're at Austin GDC, we're at Penny Arcade Expo, we're at Gamescom, we're at every single show that there is. You will find a publisher there. So you might not find the entire line of publishers, but you will find people to meet at those shows.
And Careen, this is for Larry. Are you at Dig? Larry is in the room?
Yeah, Larry was.
Are you going to be at Dig in London? London, Ontario, that is?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I tried there.
Unless you need to speak on a panel.
A couple things to keep in mind on the reality side of things. You will hear no a lot. You will also not hear any response at all a lot. I'm not saying that happens for every publisher. Hopefully they're the same quality as Careen is, where they actually do get back to you at some point. I know when I was doing biz dev, both at EA and with Microsoft, I always tried to make sure that I got back to everybody and did my best to explain why it was a no. Because the way that I looked at it, it may not be the right fit right then, just because of the product, because of where the company was at the time, because of what we were looking for. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't the right fit later on down the road. So if possible, ask your partners and the publishers, who you're dealing with, why was it a no? Try it. I'm not saying you're going to get an answer all the time, but try.
And I would just like to echo the point that I actually meant to say and I forgot. Was absolutely, yes is obviously your most valuable thing that you will get, but no is easily the second most valuable thing, because you will waste more. the old saying is there's never a bad meeting in the games industry. You will show, every publisher you will show will say, oh my God, that's cool. That is great. That is really interesting. That is very interesting. I'm going to follow up with you next week. I'm going to set up a call with a guy and do a thing. And sometimes they happen, but most of the time they don't. And I say, okay, well, we're just waiting. We've got a thing, or some things are moving around. And things just drag forever. And it's, people hate saying no, that's part of it, but it's also priorities change, or people don't want to say no just in case they want to pull your thing later. No is a very valuable answer. And it doesn't happen near as often as maybes or indefinites or whatever. So there are still publishers out there who will go talk to and say, yeah, so is Sideways still available? No, we signed that a year ago. Oh, okay, because we have a thing where it's coming up and we really might be able to fit it in. Well, no, sorry, it's gone. But a no is a very valuable thing to get because you will waste a lot of your time with publishers who really aren't that interested in what you're doing, but they don't want to say no just in case they need you later. So.
And Scott, you talked about creative ways. Well, a little bit about creative ways of getting beyond just the regular pitch, and you were mentioning the alcohol, yeah, of course, at the bar, but also showing up before the event and that sort of thing. Are there any outside the box things
homes, yes. Yeah. Showing up at Careen's house, standing over her bed. Well, I got a pitch for you.
Dennis, what about you? Do you have any outside the box?
That never actually happened.
That was a great visualization. What's that? Say that. Sorry, Rob. I was thrown off.
Anything outside the box that makes you stand out as a developer? Rather than lumping into these 50 meetings at GDC and that sort of thing. How do you stand out?
Well, we actually absolutely try to avoid having meetings at these conferences. We'll do them, but we really try to follow up elsewhere, either before or after, on-site, either at our place or at our potential partners' places. How do you stand out? That's a real tough one. We at Silicon Knights, we have our way of doing things, and I hope it's different than others. But I guess creating a culture and moving that culture, being focused on excellence in whatever we can do. We called ourselves Silicon Knights many years ago as an example because we wanted to be the knights in shining armor in the games industry. And back in the day, in early or late 1980s, we felt that there wasn't high enough quality in video games, and back then it was a very different industry if we put something in a box it would sell, because there's so few of them. Now it's the opposite. We've got more product than people can possibly consume. But so we have done things, everything that we can do to make sort of put our stamp on it. So if you came to Silicon Knights as an example on the tour, if you've been in Silicon Knights for 10 years, we knight you and we'll give you a sword. So if you go into people's offices, you'll see swords on the wall. I'm happy to say that next year, as an example, we're giving out 3 suits of armor, and these are people that have been in the company for 20 years. And so that's our culture, and so when people come down and they do due diligence or come up or visit, or we visit people, we say these things, and it's true, which is great. But not only that, it sort of says this is our culture, and whether you're small or big, you have a culture, and that culture is going to separate you, I think, in many regards. And we talk about, as an example, some of the talks that we've done in the past, video games as the 8th art form, or these are things that we really believe in. And so when it comes to creating titles, for us, it's generally been original IP. And what we like to try to do, if you look at our past history, it's all across the board. It's not one type of game per se. And so when we talk to people and they want to work with us, they know what they're getting, I think. And that's the only way I could answer that question, really. I hope that separates us anyway.
And Careen, sort of, going on along that same line, how important or how much due diligence do you do on, the staff at the development studio? Do they have the right people in place to make this, work? Do you do any? Is it just? Well, I'm just looking at your face. You seem confused.
Oh no!
Okay.
Yes, of course we do. I think that it depends on the project. Konami's been around for a while, and the product development team, the producers, The business development team have been in the industry for quite some time, so they have a really good sense of people that they know, and they know their talents, and they know their technology, and they know what these teams are able to accomplish. If it is a project that is a significant investment, the majority of those projects are being funded out of Japan right now, so they will fly to your studio, and they'll do a studio visit and sit down and talk to you and talk to your team and take a look at the technology and get a good understanding of, make sure that people are there in seats actually building product. So yes, due diligence is important, but there's a lot of history in terms of experience where we basically know a lot of the players in the industry. We know what they're doing.
And what sort of financial due diligence is done? I'm looking at the room, and when everyone was lifting their hand, or Scott woke them up, we basically could see that there's a lot of people that want to get into pitching and are looking forward to it, but may not necessarily have the financial due diligence to or financial capabilities to really produce a larger title. Is that something that you look at? Is how financially capable they are as well?
Well, it's always going to be tough for new teams to come in and pitch a product and get it placed. It's just a fact. Obviously the experience of your team members and the technology that you have, technology solution that you have, whether you license an engine or if you're planning on building it, these are basic things that you need to have the answers to. I would say start small. There's so many digital platforms these days that it's much easier to come up with an amazing idea for an iOS project, and either decide if you're capable of doing it, funding it yourself, and publishing the title yourself, or partnering with a publisher that can then publish the title for you. So if you're a brand new team, it's about knowing your strengths. It's about figuring out your technology solution. It's about presenting your ideas on the right platform in such a way, and knowing that publisher is looking for titles on that platform, and knowing what their strategy is for that particular platform.
Any questions? I don't want to take, certainly we want to answer. Go ahead, just ask.
Just noticing, as time goes by, there's certain periods where lots of games of similar type, or they just have notable similarities, come out in patches, almost like flavors of the month. As a publisher, do you like to avoid the flavor, or do you take in them at times? Do you like hearing pitches where it's all about what the market's buying or what the market might buy later?
It's about where your passion is. What do you want to make, and how are you going to make it, and how is it going to have that thing that sets it apart from everything else? So when people come and they pitch something that's a duplicate or a sequel to something that's already out there, that's not as important as it is what do you want to make, because the quality of the product is going to come through your passion and your expertise and your technology solution. It's not going to come out through just making a game based upon something else that's out there.
If your pitch can actually be summarized, this is like game X but more awesome, then you do not have a pitch. You have a terrible, terrible idea for a game. Because no publisher wants game X, because game X is the one that made all the money. I want to make Angry Birds, but angrier. They're going to be so angry. They're really angry. It's like Angry Birds, but they're not pigs. They're, sheep. Good pitch, good pitch. Nobody will buy into that to that degree. But it's one of those things where, they can't predict the future. They need to have some idea that there's going to be success there. But straight up clones or making game X but more awesome is just a death in pitching, because publishers already know game X is out there. It's the one that's actually selling.
Go ahead. Just related to that, a quick question. Do I understand this correctly then? If you were to go and pitch an idea that basically it's like game X, but it's Konami, and I want to use Metal Gear Solid IP or something like that, does that make it awesome? Or
no, that could be very awesome, but as long as you have a good take on what that is. Well, okay, maybe not Metal Gear, but no, not Metal Gear. But if you said, name another IP that you have.
Probably one of the older ones, like maybe Gyrus or Denis or.
So there you go. You want to make Gyrus, but here's.
The old retro stuff.
Or with birds.
As long as you're not remaking the exact same game, because they already had that game.
With more gyrating.
Yeah, it's more gyrating. It's Gyrus. It's Gyrest. Gyrest. That's a good name. Write that down. But the idea, no, it's using the IP is great, but it's just saying, taking a game and saying, I'm going to make that exact same game, but better. If you can't quantify how it's going to be better or different, or I'm going to take those characters and put them in a different scenario, or I'm going to take that world and make it bigger, or I'm going to bring it to a different platform that it wasn't on before, and make the game somehow different. You're just working an uphill battle because they don't want to make, they already know how to make Metal Gear Solid. They've done it many times.
Do they have Metal Gear Solid Farm though?
Well, see, but that would be an example of, okay, first of all, that is not going to be more awesome. That is going to be like Metal Gear Solid, but way less awesome.
I think, but if you're interested in working on a publisher's IP and you think, you know, they haven't been working on it recently, and that you do have a concept that would work, contact the business development person first, just to double check, because there's always things coming out there.
I see that guy in the burgundy shirt. Yes.
This is sort of related to the point you brought up about the financial, about a new team coming in spite of financial laws. Clout. If a team or a person comes pitching with a lack of clout, is that basically a death sentence, or?
Most developers out there right now, oh, thanks. Most developers are in that situation. You have very few that aren't, and those are one of the things where what I was trying to allude to earlier, where people say you can't or you shouldn't. Perseverance, and you have to start somewhere. When we were doing our first game, I wasn't sure if there was really a video game industry back then. It was late 1980s. So I went to the West Coast and I bumped into a group called SSI, and I literally looked around and said, well, they employ people, there must be money here. And Niagara, it was not a Silicon Valley back in late 1980s, let me tell you. And I think Ontario's growing now, but so absolutely not. You should not let that, matter of fact, you'll be more common than not. And you want to elevate yourself to where you do have some clout, certainly, but don't let that slow you down.
And just as a real example, so when we pitched our first game for downloadable console, that'd be 2007, and then basically we had to get a publisher, but we had never put a game up before. But we kept going back and pitch, and eventually we had a publisher pick it up. They put a piece of IP on it that, as it turns out, was a terrible idea, but we didn't know that at the time. We thought, hey, they must know what they're talking about. Turns out they didn't know what they were talking about. So we had this great game with terrible IP on it, and that's fine. But it did get us our foot in the door, and now we can do sort of the kind of stuff that we want to do. So we're doing a lot more games now that we want to do, not necessarily all entirely our IP. We do work with publishers who have IP, and we can do them in different things. But you got to start somewhere, and it's very much like just don't go into it thinking you're going to make one game and it's going to be the greatest game ever, and then you're done. You know, you're going to evolve, you're going to create different things, you're going to do work for hire stuff. One of the things that we didn't touch on is a lot of times you go in and pitch a publisher and say, I have the greatest game ever, here it is, and then Careen will say, that is the dumbest game ever. However, I do have a piece of IP that I do need somebody to work on, and some of the elements we just talked about actually fit very well with this piece of IP. Would you like to, come up with a plan for this piece of IP and then basically do it on a work for hire basis? So that does happen a lot, is you go in to pitch one thing, but you actually, a couple months later, end up working on something different, but it's based on what you were pitching in the first place. They see your passion, they see that you're organized, they see you can create something that does have a nice hook that works with a piece of the IP that happens all the time in the industry.
I would never say it's the dumbest game ever.
You told me it was the dumbest game.
I would say it's a game with a slight learning disability.
She was saying, Scott, that you were the dumbest person.
Oh, right. I confuse them all the time. I'm putting it on the box art.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Going back to what you guys were talking about, standing out of the crowd in a conference, does it happen often where a developer, indie developer that doesn't have a publisher, gets approached by the publisher? And if so, what is it that the publisher sees in them, looks for, that makes them approach you?
They won an indie award. you have a lot of people that are showing product. And we have a lot of developers that are coming up with games, or starting game development, and then they're showing it themselves at Pan Arcade Expo, where they're showing it, they're entering all the indie awards that are out there. And that is where you have publishers kind of circling to see what's out there, to meet with new teams that they may not know about. So yeah, I actually just lost one of those titles to Microsoft.
Last question in the back.
Thanks. Going back to what Scott just said, thanks for all the info. Like sometimes it feels like we're guessing when we make the pitch, and then they might say, the publisher might say, well, I don't like that, but I have this. So instead of us trying to guess what you have, is there some kind of request for proposal process that publishers could give us?
That generally happens. But getting to Careen's point, it's more like they have a lot of options for them. So if you actually have an idea for Gyrus, say, or something, like go through a publisher's back catalog, look for things that haven't been made lately. And we do this frequently. To say, hey, I would love to play Game X. Or I have a really good idea for Game X, but in a new way. And you can approach that publisher very flat out with their biz dev bits. Say, look, we actually really would like to do something. Are you doing something with whatever? Because to Careen's point, there's always things moving. So they might be saying, yeah, we actually already know that that's due for a comeback, so we're working on something already. Or they'll actually say, yeah, give us a one sheet or a 5-page or whatever it takes.
But would the publisher ever say, hey, anyone out there want to do a proposal for this old Gyrus?
Yeah, no, it will happen. No, actually, Dave.
Or how do you get on that list?
That's probably going back to the perseverance and getting that relationship together first, so that the publisher has a clear idea of what that team is capable of. When you're at the point where we've got this particular product we're doing internally, so using Need for Speed as an example, we're going to be creating the main console versions inside. We're going to look and see who's going to be able to handle a PSP version or a PS version. We already have a relationship with those developers. So, okay, we know that these guys are solid in this area, and so we're going to go talk to a couple of these guys that we've built that relationship up with, and then see what do they think they can bring to it.
So it seems like a huge part is then perseverance means also building a relationship with them, even if you're not necessarily doing something for them.
Yeah, relationship is the thing that you really, really want to try to build up. And it's been echoed a few times. Chances are you're in here to know, but that doesn't mean that it's a no forever.
Great.
And the best thing is just to get that relationship going and be able to. One of the things is to update the publisher partners. If you start, if you've come out with something new, give your biz dev contact a call and say, hey, look, just want to keep you updated. This is what we've done. Here's something new. As things come out, the publisher might have a need in a particular area. Just remind them that yes, we put something out, fits into what they're looking for. The publisher then might be going, oh yeah, I should actually give these guys a call.
The other thing that's different now than maybe used to be in the old days, it's not, development studios are more rarely now tied to one publisher. Publishers do not look on it poorly if we're doing so say we're doing like 4 XBLA PSN games in the next 5 months get released. They are to 3 different publishers. But it's not like Careen looks at that as, oh, you're getting published with someone else, so therefore I'm not going to talk to you again. It's not like that, right? Please tell me that's not. So it's not like you're burning a bridge by actually going with another publisher. They expect that you have to, keep putting food on the table, so you're going to be doing stuff with other publishers, but you can always come back and do different things.
We have literally 1 minute left, or actually less than that.
That man has a 45-second question.
Do you have a 5-second question?
5-second question.
Because we have to wrap it up too.
Okay,
yes, please go ahead.
Do you love or hate game agents?
Hate? Oh, no, wait. You didn't ask me.
I think that game agents can serve a purpose. I think that, certain development teams, teams like Silver Knights are able to have the direct relationship. They have a tremendous amount of experience. They know everyone. They have such strong contacts in the industry. But there are teams that, either are smaller or newer or don't have the time or don't have the business experience. And so they can serve a purpose. And, we love them, we hate them, same thing. We love Anthem.
And I will just quickly note again, you never rely, because we actually have agents now. We didn't have them until our merger of studios. But we're actually finding the agents fill a very valid role, which is more of the updating and continual conversation, because they're on the ground. So we have an agent in LA, like there's one of the guys are in LA working all the time who will talk to Careen 7 times a day or whatever, just about different things, and it's all about that relationship is kept there. We never expect them to do the pitch. That still has to come from us. It's still the ideas and everything still happen there. But the ability to actually better communicate with a publisher or a number of publishers, the agent actually is very helpful.
And we use agents as well. So even though you can position it so you might not necessarily need them, we do use them, and we use them for quite a while.
Dennis, any final advice? 10 seconds.
No, just believe in what you're doing, and as I said earlier, is perseverance, and I think that passion and what you can stand behind. Don't try to look to the future what anyone else wants. I think creating what you want to do will really set you apart, and that passion, from what I've seen in the history of pitching, is really what gets people excited. Because by the time you start a game and by the time you finish, there's going to be a lot of changes likely. And when you're partnering with someone, when it means partnering, it's going to change. But that passion, that's the one thing that can't change. So I think that's one of the most important.
Scott?
Get out of the games business now and do something where you can actually make money, because games business is not that. I know, Dennis, I am negative. I am the yin to your yang. No, I want to be the yang. You be the yin. The one thing I will say is, again, some people will tell you to AVP, always be pitching, and you're always doing your thing and whatever. I look at it a slightly different way. Relationships are very important in business, and gaming is absolutely no different. Getting to know people that you're actually selling to or talking to, like I've got to know Careen over the last couple of years, and we will have a drink together, it's fine. We have we know who each other, I'm not going to show up at your house and stand over your bed, but the point is then when it is time for me to actually bring a pitch up, she has some idea of what we're doing, because we'll talk about what our current projects is, and she'll tell me what her things are. Similarly, don't just be looking at a publisher like a dollar sign and you have to do something, and chances are you're never going to work with most publishers. Same thing with development houses. You can always partner with companies to do some different things. So Dennis and I, again, similarly, have grown to know each other, and there's a grudging respect that have grown between us. It's like a buddy cop movie all the time. Relationships are important in gaming, so don't always be pitching. Just go out there, meet people, and find out what everybody enjoys, and your life will be easier for it. Careen, your turn.
Completely agree. Relationships, perseverance, networking, continuing to have conversations, continuing to learn how publishers' business is evolving, and continuing to tell everyone how your business is evolving. That's the most important. And then please, this is the games industry. We're not doing brain surgery. We're supposed to be having fun. So have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. And I won't either.
Ditto. Avoid Scott Simpson if you can. Unless you're out drinking, we'll just realize that you will not win. I mean that.
And the drink will be on fire.
Yeah. And so will your shirt. And along with that, the last little bit of advice I'd suggest is set your own trends. If you're looking at, the desktop defense games, they're selling like hotcakes. I'm going to make a desktop defense game. You're not going to sell it. Make your own trends.
I'm shocked that no one's advice was deal with EDC. It's a sponsored session.
Oh yeah, and deal with EDC.
Just a few final things. I will certainly pimp Dennis's session that's going to go on right after this in another room. Musings in a Cloud.
Musings about clouds.
About clouds. So please join his session. Also, I am actually going to be on a panel later on today talking about financial models and how we're supporting the industry from a financial perspective. That's at 3:45, so please join that, because certainly it's one of the aspects of your business, right? It's not just the quality content, but also how are you actually going to develop that content and put the money together to do that. So certainly getting to know what the financial models are and how banks are supporting it, and EDC is supporting the banks in what they're doing. I think is certainly something that you have to consider as well. And finally, if some of you are involved in the meetings with Konami tomorrow, great. We look forward to seeing it tomorrow. We have, I believe it's 17 meetings overall, so just the right number to be able to make an impression on Careen tomorrow. And for those of you who were not aware of the Konami matchmaking and certainly want to start being involved in some of these events, please see me after this and make sure that you are on our mailing list and on our radar so that we can look at future events. EDC's done this sort of thing with a number of publishers in the past, and will continue to do that in the future simply because we want to be able to help you grow your business and meet the right people to be able to sign these deals and be able to succeed in this space. So thank you everyone for joining, and I hope we answered your questions. And for most, except for Dennis, who's got to go off to the next, I think we've got some times for one-on-one questions after. Thanks.